Meet me in the shade of the sunshine tree. Pretty little Florida sunshine tree. Cool and sweet, what a lovely spot. A place to meet when the sun is hot. Da 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 da. Yep, I was a kid when they used to put this on TV. And at one time, Florida was very important for citrus growing. In fact, when they came up with a state fruit and a state flower for Florida, they made it the orange and its flower, which obviously is not on right now. And as you can see, this is definitely a sour orange tree. Now you can tell by its sort of pointy end, and it looks pretty nice. This fruit is actually quite beautiful. I mean, you can see it's not really, you don't see a lot of imperfections. We don't get a lot of insects over here. You'll also notice that there are definite thorns on this tree. Now, for many years, we've lost our citrus trees, and it's because of the commercialization of citrus culture. There was a time when you could drive up the state, and even down here in the Miami area, we had groves of limes, lemons, oranges, calamondins, all these beautiful citrus trees. And what they would do, they would take the natural environment, they would bulldoze it, and then they would just put in rows and rows of citrus trees. And these things went all the way up the state. I remember as a kid, about a year after Disney World opened, my parents decided to take me there. It was kind of interesting, although I have to admit, after being there, I really wasn't that impressed. It was cute and all that, but I got more enjoyment out of going to the dump. But anyway, I do remember the citrus trees and the delicious smell of those citrus blossoms. And when I was a kid, obviously we were told that orange juice was very important. A breakfast without orange juice is like a day without sunshine. That's what we were told. And again, if you know who used to do these commercials, it was a lady, her name was Anita, and she got herself into a lot of controversy by trying to force her views on other people. But anyway, now, what happened to the citrus industry? Well, we know that the ultimate reason is because it's a lot more profitable to stack and pack. Cram as many people as possible into this state until there's so much traffic you can't move, and there's so much weight that it sinks into the ocean from which it came. But the citrus industry has been plagued with problems since the beginning. Obviously, climate issues. If it gets too cold, the citrus would freeze. But again, having it down here in Miami, you didn't have that problem. In fact, all the way up to Lake Okeechobee, the citrus was pretty much okay. A little cold weather's good for it. The biggest problem that really hit the citrus industry was insects and disease. And if you look at this relatively wild citrus tree, you'll see that there is actually a little bit of insect activity. There's also this sticky stuff. But this is actually from the gumbo limbo tree, which is up top, which I'm actually cutting. You can see here there's some fungus that got in here and it's been leaking sap. So we're going to cut this branch off and try to trim this tree back. There's a lot of trimming that needs to be done. This black olive needs trimming. So I'm using my pole saw and my handy rope chainsaw. One of these days, I hope to get my hands on a snorkel lift or boom lift so I can get up there with my hydraulic chainsaw and really shape these trees. Well, what's the point? When I sell this place, some idiot's going to cut it all down like they always do. But as long as I have it, I might as well try to tidy it up. What I'm going to do when I get ready to move all this small stuff, you can see most of these plants are in pots. They're going to go with me. If I move to another part of Florida, I can put them in the ground. If I go somewhere else, I'll just have to build a big greenhouse. And considering how small my yard is, I could easily build a greenhouse this size and have all the tropical plants I wanted. Just like my friend who lives in Minnesota. This guy grew up in Miami, was always broke, because that's what happens when you live in Miami. Personal trainer and carnivore since 1998. If I could only get him to not be so private and maybe go on to my channel or somebody else's channel. But anyway, we're not going to push that. He has a greenhouse at his house. And the greenhouse is about, I think, 100 feet long and about 25 feet wide. So it's a pretty big one. And he's got coconuts and bananas and all that stuff, which is ironic because he's a carnivore like me. Yet he loves to grow the fruits and vegetables, and he gives it to his friends. And that's a great thing. But anyway, he also has citrus trees. I believe he has an orange tree and he has a lime. So But yeah, this stuff is beautiful. And again, it is a state flower and fruit. If you have one of these, consider yourself privileged because they're really, really nice. Now, again, the disease. What really hit the citrus industry was citrus canker. In the early 2000s, the state was coming around cutting down these citrus trees. So what I did, I took mine out of here when nobody was looking. I took them to a piece of land that I had, further away. And I basically escaped the state wiping out my citrus. But this one over here, believe it or not, was a seed. One of those oranges I used to eat. There used to be a little fence right here, and this thing sprouted up. And it did basically nothing because it's kind of in the shade. And sometime around, I guess, when we had the hurricane, 2005, Hurricane Wilma, it sprouted up. Actually grew into a nice little citrus tree. Now, if you'll notice right here, see how it's partially dead? This tree died, and the only thing left was this little branch growing here. But then this sprout came out of the bottom. Now, as you can see, being a seed-grown tree, it has a lot of thorns, and the fruit is generally sour because in the wild, citrus is a sour fruit. And these wild trees, they use soil fungi to coexist with other plants. You'll often see them thriving next to oak trees. And in this case, it's this gumbo limbo tree, which is also a native. They coexist, and this helps them avoid getting pathogenic fungus from the ground. But also, this fungi seems to act as almost like an antibiotic. So when insects bring in these harmful viruses and bacteria that usually would destroy this plant, it seems to be able to grow on and on. Now again, this stuff is just leaking from the gumbo limbo tree. But notice there are no aphids, there's no citrus crawlers, it's basically insect free. And I think a lot of it is because it's growing in this multi-species environment. There are native plants, there are non-native plants, there's all kinds of stuff growing here. And you'll notice there's not a lot of insects in anything. You just don't see the insect population explode. With these large trees and all those birds, those insects are just food. There's ladybugs, I don't see them here, but they are around. I mean, there is some insect damage. You can see the leaves are a little curled, but that's normal for all plants. Plus, all you have to do is rub one of these leaves, and it has a very strong citrus smell. That's citrus, it's like citronella. They use that to repel insects. So a wild citrus tree is going to produce a lot of that resin, and as you can see, the fruit remains relatively protected. I mean, I don't really see any damage. And even though citrus canker basically hit this area hard 20 years ago, there's no citrus canker on this tree. So how can that be? Well, again, my original citrus trees were seed grown, and they were not sweet oranges. They were sour. In fact, I love citrus because of the sourness, because you can marinate meats. It's also very nice if you have friends coming over and they want to have grilled chicken, which I don't like. You can make a mojo sauce using this citrus. So this is a really nice plant to have. But you see, every one of these citrus trees that I've grown is genetically different because they pollinate and they grow from a seed. All the commercial ones are grafted. What they'll do, they'll grow hundreds, maybe thousands of different trees, and they'll pick the one that has the flavor they like. And those tend to have less seeds as well. You open one of these up, it's loaded with seeds. That's why those trees couldn't stand up to the pressure of insects and disease. It's the same thing with these bananas. Because the bananas that we grow are seedless and they can't pollinate, they can't sexually reproduce, they have no genetic diversity. If one of these gets infected, they all get infected. Now I try to grow 4 different varieties in the yard. You got this Namwa, you got the ice cream banana, you got the burro banana, and then the plantain. These are all different varieties, although they are basically combinations of Musa cumanata and Musa balbiciano. And again, I did have the seeded bananas, but they got wiped out in one of the hurricanes. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. Another plant that I lost, we used to have these cycads. This one is Diuna dula, which is a type of cycad. There was a scale, a little white stuff that used to live on the cycads. I had beautiful sago palms. They got wiped out by the stupid scale. But the joke was on the scale itself, because once it wiped out all the cycads that it could eat, it couldn't eat these. The scale has disappeared. And I think the same thing's going to happen with the citrus. If we didn't have a large citrus industry, if we just had individual citrus trees growing from seeds like this, I have a feeling that they would adapt and they would be able to grow. And there are places you can see wild citrus trees, even in the Everglades. I've seen them by the side of the road. The biggest enemy of citrus is not the insects and disease, but it's developers. And developers are the biggest industry of all of us, well, the biggest enemy of all of us. And I absolutely hate them because I think that they are like cancer, and they're basically why Florida is the disaster it is now. But anyway, I just wanted to share this with you, and maybe some of you are old enough to remember some of those citrus commercials. And again, today, I'm sure if any of these citrus companies still exist, they've turned into real estate holdings. And of course, here's my helper, little Bob. I got him covered up so nobody will mess with him. And once I get these branches cut, I'm gonna try to chip them. I got some stuff I gotta move around before I put him in his little home behind the gate. So anyway, that's what I'm doing, and I hope everybody's gonna have a great week, and I'll catch you later.